Hello, Stein. Thank you very much for coming on the early days of Micromobility podcast. It's a great honor to have you on. You are a big voice in our shared industry, shared mobility industry, especially for bikes. You have obviously your books that you have written. You have a lot of experience, and you are a voice online as well. So thank you very much for willing to share your opinion on the Paris vote.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you very much. So, Stein, first, before we start, I would like to know a little bit about your background. How did you enter this industry, and a little bit about what drives you to really be the voice that you are in our industry.
Yeah, my background is first of all, I grew up in the Netherlands. It's the bicycle paradise until I was 23, and I wanted to live in the country of Jean Paul Sartre, the famous philosopher of freedom, because I liked the French language. So I moved to France. So I've spent most of kind of half of my life in the Netherlands and then in France. So that's important to know. So I look at France, still through Dutch eyes, even though you become French when you've been here for so long.
Yeah.
My background is social science. I studied psychology and philosophy, and that really you can notice that when you read my book, Why Not the Bicycle, for example, because I think these two disciplines are essential for any transition. Because if you want to transition, and I think that's what we're talking about, you need to think new. So you need philosophy, and philosophy is the art of amazement, of asking your questions like, why is this situation like this? Why is the city the way it is? It's not natural to do so. And once you've thought and invented the city of tomorrow, you need psychology to understand why people don't want to go there. Because if people like a paradise, Paris, especially a bicycle paradise, why don't they want to go there? And that's why I studied psychology, because I'm interested in human beings. So that's my background. And then my job is I'm diplomatic attaché for the Dutch government in the Netherlands at UNESCO. It's actually the permanent delegation of the Netherlands to UNESCO. But that has nothing to do with the reason why you invited me, because I have a double life. I'm also a citizen, very committed to active mobility, and so I started a bicycle association in 2016, just because I wanted to make myself useful, and I found it a bit strange that there were so few people on a bicycle, whereas it's a super practical. Healthy, effective way of moving, and so I said, "Hey, let's invent some policy to make my city." It's a small city south of Paris. It's Fontenay-aux-Roses. It's just 6 kilometers from Paris. To make it to turn that into a cycling city, and actually, I thought it was just would be kind of an activity, but it completely transformed my life, because now I'm talking about cycling and mobility and cities all over the world, actually, and yeah, it's a fascinating topic, and now that's where I stand here
But yeah,
to.
but you also wrote a book regarding the cycling and the cycling policy as well, right? Can you maybe elaborate a little bit about your book?
Yes, it's called Why Not the Bicycle? I wrote it in French, Pourquoi pas le vélo? And I wrote it after having had almost hundreds of debates with people, especially all over France, but also in Belgium, in Quebec, in Canada, in Tunisia. I had lots of exchanges about how does a society change into a bicycle paradise? How does that work? What are the things that we're afraid of? What are the difficulties? And I had so many interesting exchanges with people that I thought it's a pity to just, to just limit this to the people in the room. I wanted to write it down somewhere. So what I did is I collected all the most beautiful thoughts that really convinced me, that I found really interesting, that opened my eyes, because I had to discover this. I'm not a city planner by training, so I discovered a lot of things, and so I decided to share this with everybody. So I wrote it down. It was very easy to do because I'm very passionate about it.
Yep.
It took me 3 years. And when it came out in 2021, well, this generated a lot of interest, because I was just lucky, because that's exactly when the bicycle boom just
Exactly.
got loose, and so people needed people who had written and thought about the bicycle, and so now it's all over the place. It's being used actually as a tool to not only to convince but just get a conversation going about
Yeah,
cycling. And it's also a book that really that tells you our thinking mistakes, because our brain, our mind is not programmed to understand naturally transition. When you see a road, for example, that's full of cars, most people's minds will automatically say, well, you need to make it wider.
exactly.
But the truth is
Four lanes.
actually the opposite,
Yeah,
because mobility, it's not just a number of cars or a number of vehicles. It's a behavior. It's a freedom. It's a choice, and
exactly.
it's up to us governments to orient that choice and to guide that choice. And that's what we're doing by providing shared mobility and also by turning the streets into people-friendly places. And that's what I'm passionate about.
Exactly. Well, thank you very much. I would like to have your opinion about another shared micromobility vehicle. And around 2017, 2018, we started seeing shared electric kick scooters on the streets, first starting in Santa Monica and the United States. Before we knew it, they were all over the world, with the name Bird. It's like they could fly all over the world. We had
Yeah.
scooters everywhere. And then we went through a whole learning process of operations because first they were just dropping scooters everywhere. Obviously, that caused a lot of nuisance, and there were some regulations, some pilots and tests with cities, and there were some adjustments in terms of deployments, in terms of hardware. There was a development with swappable batteries. There were some developments with sensors, with more safety. However, we have come to a time where now we have a public vote in the city of Paris, a city who has always been at the forefront when it comes to shared mobility. When you look at the usage of VLEB, which had around 44 millions rides this year, which is huge, obviously. So Paris has always been at the forefront. However, obviously there are still some challenges that electric kick scooters are still facing. That is why we are here today on this podcast, and I would like to understand these challenges from the point of view from someone like you who has a lot of experience with the policies of bike share and bikes, not only in France but also in the Netherlands.
Well, thanks for this question. Why thanks? Because we need debate. I think the good thing about this question is that it sparks debate. And
Exactly.
when society is changing, you need to cover these changes. First of all, before I answer this question, I would like to say that many people they put one blame on this question. They say this is not the right question to ask right now. This is not a priority. This is not the problem. This is not the elephant in the room. The elephant in the room, it's the elephant. It's the car. It's the car that takes up all the space and that creates an unhealthy lifestyle, that creates danger, that creates pollution, that makes cities unpleasant places to be in. Why are you talking about these little scooters that take up so little space? And why are you making a fuss out of it? That's just preliminary remarks. So, which is indeed true. But the question is raised by the city of Paris. They ask the citizens of Paris, do you want shared scooters or not? That's the question that is asked. So now my opinion on these scooters as such. Um, I personally think there are three reasons to say no to that question. Let's stop it. Let's stop these even scooters altogether. It might sound very strange, but I'll explain
The
it.
private the
The
private scooters as well, or only the shared
Yeah, the
scooters?
private scooters as well. May sound very radical and strange, but I'll explain this opinion. First of all, it's the danger. Again, it's strange because the car is much more dangerous, but that's another topic, and the city of Paris is also working on that. So now I
Yeah.
revert back to the scooter and danger. How come? The thing is that there are several reasons that make it dangerous for the people who are using it. First of all, because of the very small wheels that makes them very vulnerable, because there's many holes in the street, and as soon as you get stuck, there's no way you can stay on the road. You can keep rolling, which is more the case on a bicycle. That's the first reason. The second reason is the distance between the two wheels. It's very short. That makes you very vulnerable to tipping. That's a second risk. The third risk is well, the brakes were not that good in the beginning. That may have been solved because, of course, these companies, they evolve very quickly. And there's another reason, it's that they have a very weak reactivity. You know, when you're on a bicycle, for example, or even on a motorbike, you can quickly accelerate and get you out of situations. The scooters, the electric scooters, they're much more slower, so it's more difficult to save yourself in certain situation. And there's another thing that I don't hear people talking about. It's about indicating your direction. It's
The
you're not
light
really
is yellow.
visible. There are two ways of doing it. What the companies tell me, they said, well, we have the in
The
direction
blinkers.
lights. How do you call them?
The
Uh,
blinkers. Yeah.
the blinkers, exactly. But I filmed them. I made a whole thread on Twitter that you can see, where I filmed it. You don't see it because it's very small. First of all,
Yeah.
secondly, it is very low to the
The
street.
ground.
So it's not, that's not where your eye is. Your eye is really where the taillights of the cars and of the bicycle in the Netherlands are, because they normalized it. And for all these reasons, it's difficult. I see people sometimes indicating their direction desperately by putting out a leg, just how do you call it? They're just indicating direction with a leg, but it's way too dangerous. So this makes it a dangerous situation. The second reason why I would say no is that these scooters, they're of course a passive mobility. There are many positive things about it. It's very small, it's very practical, it's not that expensive, it's even funny. But the thing is, it's you are like a bag of potatoes on it. I mean, you don't move, so it doesn't encourage people to move. And there was a study that was done by the company 6T, who did that for the city of Paris, and that
Yeah.
looked into this situation, and they found that when you look at all the free floating services, be it bicycle, moped, or this kick scooter, is they found that the kick scooters, as you call them, right,
Yeah.
uh, have 1 out of 3 trips they replace a pedestrian trip, meaning that in 1 out of 3 trips, the user would have walked had there not been this scooter, which means that they delete a lot of pedestrian trips. And I think that pedestrian trips, well, it's not, deleting them is bad for the health, but it's also bad for the city, because that brings me to my third point. I think the reason why I would say no is, and that's a more complicated reason, is that I think we all have an idea about what the city is. We imagine what a nice city is, what a pleasant city is, and I think that Paris, in particular, is the city of walkers. It's the city of pedestrians. When you think of Paris, you think of terraces, people sitting, moving with their legs, moving their bodies, and interacting with each other, and also with the facades. And
Okay.
if you allow the moped or the scooters, it's like if you put a transition from the pedestrians to the fast lane. You're putting it in the fast lane, and then you can
Okay.
say, yeah, but the bicycle is also the fast lane, which is true. But at least people are still moving, and it's also a kind of dignity, even because moving with your body, it's a way of showing, hey, I have a body, it's healthy, I want to keep it healthy, so I'm moving. And it's good for your body. It's also good for the city itself. So these 3 reasons would make me say, no. Let's invest in a bicycle culture. Let's not invest in, these things that would discourage, especially young people, from getting used to the bicycle as a much safer and much more robust way of moving around.
Yeah. I would like to counter on your argument there when it comes to, for example, the wheels of the e-scooters, right?
Yeah,
Uh, I know that when we started in our industry with e-scooters, it were all very small wheels. But if you look at the progress at the e-scooters of Dot, for example, the wheels are quite big wheels, especially here on the cobblestones. And these are things that will further improve, right? So when we are discussing the hardware, it will surely iterate into a better hardware, a better product, maybe in the next 12 months or maybe 18 months or whatever. So is that really something that should be used as an argument to ban, knowing that it can be improved? Wouldn't it be better if the city could put some requirements on the hardware? For example, the wheels have to be this big or this big if you want to operate in our city. Don't you think when it comes to um, critiquing the hardware or the software of the solution, it's something that we can maybe put some requirements on, and that the operators who want to operate should abide by these requirements if they want to operate? So isn't there some way for the city to say, okay, if you really want to operate in Paris, this is what we want for safety, this is what it should be. If you can't do it, then you can't operate. Wouldn't that be a better way of going forward, seeing that there's a need of 400,000 people for this solution every month? What do you think?
I'll react to the two parts of your counter arguments. I really appreciate this exchange. First of all, the need. I think needs are created. There is a need because we created it. If you distribute French fries, you will see that there's a need for French fries. If you distribute cigarettes, you'll see there will be a need for cigarettes. That's actually how they conquered the world. If you invent the car, etc. So for me that doesn't work. That argument. On the contrary, I think we have a responsibility to make sure that we have the right needs for a pleasant city. With regards to the size of the wheels, what you showed to me, they're still small wheels. And actually, what you propose is very reasonable, to change the norms in such a way that the size of the wheel makes it safer, makes the scooter safer. This is exactly what the Netherlands did. And the Netherlands is a country that currently forbids or does not allow that for the scooters as you see them in Paris and all over the world to roll. Why? Because of the size of these wheels. And you can see it because on the
Okay.
website of the government, you see that they allowed 17 types of what they call light electric vehicles, and that includes these e-scooters. And when you look at those scooters that they consider really safe, you see that they have big wheels. And then I mean really big wheels. It's more like the small wheels of these small foldable bikes. It's actually a size that is in between the size that you just showed me, that are on the scooters as they exist and roll over the place in the world, and a real big bicycle wheel. It's in the middle, and there you can see, you feel that it's safe. But when you create such a scooter, well, people in the Netherlands don't use it because then you might as well take a bike, because you put a saddle on it, you can sit, you can carry much more stuff. It's much safer because the distance between the wheels is much bigger. It's more comfortable. Why, invent it? Why create this need? You see?
Okay.
So it is possible. It's not forbidden, but the criteria to get the authorization, they're so they're so severe, let's say, that, or
Yeah.
demanding, that the once you create
It
them,
would
it
change.
looks either like almost like a bike, or like a cargo bike, or like a Segway, for example, and
Okay.
those kinds of things.
Okay. Yeah. I
And
see.
this is also this raises the question about how what the relation is between the scooter and the bicycle culture, because it will slow down the bicycle culture. Um, that's why in the Netherlands we don't need it, but that's why we're having this discussion here more, because here the bicycle culture hasn't conquered completely the city and 100% of the population. So many people would say, well, I find this scooter much more practical because it's very easy to hop on. Well, but then you get, the danger, and the danger argument, the argument of unhealthy lifestyle, and again, the I would say the heritage argument, the heritage of Paris as an active city.
Okay, but when you look at other cities besides Paris, Paris also had first a pilot of 2 years. I think they did some tender, had a lot of requirements to take the three best operators that they thought. So they operated for 3 years. I'm sure they had some feedback from that. Obviously, the feedback might have not been good enough to say let's do it. They prefer to do a public vote. But when you look at trials in the United Kingdom, for example, where they are also struggling with allowing e-scooters, because I think there they need to change the law first to be able to allow them. You see that they are also hesitating to allow e-scooters, but in Brussels, on the other hand, you see that there are 10 operators. It's like the Wild Wild West. So how do you look at these different cities in Europe with different policies so close to each other, who can look at each other to get feedback,
Yeah,
yet they are kind of like doing their own thing? Doesn't that also make it a little bit harder for the operators to, okay, they need to follow the rules in the UK, which are a little bit different, and Brussels, it's like the wild, wild west. In Paris, it's also strict, and the Netherlands, they might need to create a whole new vehicle. So I guess it's a little bit too much, maybe, or confusing for the operators to keep up. This is just my opinion, of course, from an outside perspective. But what is your opinion on this?
that it's fascinating that we're in the jungle phase where cities are trying out things bottom up, and I think that is the way you can create change, because I think things should start that way. You cannot make laws on things immediately and say how you want to keep things nationally. It's good to have tests. I think that one of the explanations for the Netherlands being a bicycle country today is because they tested a lot. They
Yeah.
tried out things, and they were not afraid to be ridiculous, and that is why they managed to do so. But
They also invest a lot.
sorry.
They also invest a lot into the bike culture. The new bike garage underwater is amazing.
Exactly.
In the Netherlands, it's amazing.
And
Yeah.
but that's now because they went through the difficult times, and now it has become an economic model. I mean, it's necessary economically to survive. But to get back to your question is, we are actually at the point where we're going maybe to leave this jungle situation, because as we're speaking, just a few hours ago, there was a press conference by Clément Beaune, the French
Good.
Minister of Transportation, and he just
Yes.
announced that he does not want to forbid them. He wants to regulate it better, because one of the reasons Paris took this decision to organize this voting, yeah, exactly, that's the picture of that meeting, where he said, I want to create an observatory, for example. I want knowledge, because when you're in jungle, you need um, to look what's happening. You need to collect data, and that's what he wants to do. He wants a communication campaign. He wants a longer life cycle. He wants these things to be very ecological. But the reason why Paris still wants to ask the Parisians, "Do you want to keep it?" is that they had a lot of return on experience, because they started this in 2018, the first city actually, and it was a
Exactly.
mess. It was a complete mess. They were all over the place. But in a very short period of time, under Christoph Najdowski at that time, he was the mayor, the deputy mayor, they managed to control it. And it was very impressive, because you see drop-off zones all over the place now. But despite these huge efforts, yeah, you still see them lying around sometimes. But that also applies to free floating bicycles. So I think that's not the argument against it. It's you we must be able to handle that. But Paris has another problem, and that is that it's the most densely populated city in Europe, and the
Yeah.
sixth most
Yeah.
densely populated area in the world. So it's the little spot, every little thing you do in public space, it creates a problem. So for Paris, it was really difficult to create it. So that's one of the questions, one of the reasons why they asked these questions. So I think that's why we need this conversation. So Sunday, 2 April, when we're going to have this referendum, it's going to be very, very interesting, because the decision that's going to be taken here will necessarily have consequences in the rest of the world, because Paris is a mobility laboratory, and people will look at it
Exactly.
and they will ask us these same questions to talk about it.
Exactly. I was going to ask you actually about that, the effect that the vote in Paris might have to uh, possibly Brussels, who is, I think, looking at what's happening in Paris before they start to do the implementation. But if you look at the northern countries, there they decided from early on to do it in a different way by first doing a small pilot, learning from the pilot, doing some iterations, and also repeating the pilot again. And I think they were one of the first to have the dedicated parkings, like with physical parking infrastructure. I think Voi implemented that very early on, and they have been really at the forefront of that by doing short pilots and so on. Now, how come do you think in the northern countries they go about it in a different way than in the main Europe, where it's maybe chaotic is not the right term, but when you look at the different regions and different cities, it looks as it's still in the early days, as you said, as still the jungle phase. While in the northern countries, it's way more relaxed, way more strategic, way more. It's kind of like they have it figured out basically, and they're just looking at us and laughing. I don't know.
Well, for the scooters, is it's it they're also looking at what's happening in the rest of the world, because they, I mean, even though the Netherlands has taken the decision, it's, because the bicycle lanes, they're already so full that they have to think twice or three or four times before they let a new category of vehicles enter these bicycle lanes, because even with the current diversity of bicycles, and I'm not only talking about electric bikes that go faster, but also bigger bikes, cargo bikes,
And the
and
cargo bikes.
handicapped people have bikes. You have small bikes, big bikes. So there's a total transformation going on. And if you add this other category, which has different needs, that's there's questions that you have to ask. Um, but why it is different? Yeah. Uh, that they all have figured it out. I wouldn't say that. I think they've tried out different things, and in the Netherlands it
Yeah.
was the bicycle situation, and that's why it's very nice for people from abroad and from France. Many people are going to the Netherlands to look around and to experience the situation. But for the scooter, yeah, it also depends on the development of the bicycle culture as it is now. I mean, I think that if there was many bicycles here as in the Netherlands, you wouldn't think about it so much. This famous need that you spoke about, this need, I think
Okay.
it's this exists because there's a problem. Julien Labaca, who's a consultant in mobility, I did an intervention with him last week, and he said these scooters are kind of the paracetamol, the medication against headaches for mobility.
Yeah.
Why? Because it doesn't really treat the cause. It's short solution, because the cause is that you have a headache of being stuck in traffic. And so you need a robust way to get around, safe, being able to carry your stuff and even your children. And a scooter is not going to give you that. I actually see people on scooters wanting to carry stuff, and sometimes they hook them on to the scooters. It's because, like Frédéric Héran, who's a French economist and city planner, an urbanist, he said it's a way of transportation that is not finalized yet. So that's why your argument is very good. Indeed, we should work on having the right norms, but we're not there yet. And you can see that in the
Yep.
way people use it now. And it's going very fast, because now something that makes people very mad is that you see sometimes two people on it. But last week I saw an article that one of the three providers in Paris, because there are three operators here, has invented a new technology that prevents you from being two on a scooter. And that is fantastic. You see that the
Yeah.
technology is evolving very fast. And I think that one of the nice things about this discussion is that it gets us talking also about technology. I give you another
Yep.
example, because if you ask about the consequences, if you stop this, it will be much more difficult to regulate, for example, private scooters in terms of speed.
Exactly.
Because
Yeah.
with these scooter groups, that belong to companies, you can limit their speeds in certain areas because you can program them. It's more difficult to
Yep.
do that with private scooters. So that's a consequence. Another consequence will be that if we stop it, well, that can also mean that people, they need bikes, and there are
Yeah.
15,000 currently in Paris. So Paris will rapidly need to put in place 15 bicycles. And I think there's a very good reason to do so, because in 1 year from now, we have the Olympic Games. And,
I
and,
know.
and
Yeah.
what we believe as Bicycle Association is that these 600,000 people that will be in Paris every day on top of the usual load of people, well, 1/3 of them should be able to use a bicycle. So we need a lot more bicycles. And the good news is that Paris just recently decided to launch what they call the Olympiste. Piste is the French word for bicycle lane, and it's like the
Yeah.
Olymp bicycle lane. It's a word
Olympic.
game. French is a nice language, and so they're going to build specially dedicated bicycle lanes to the Olympic Games. So it's really pushing the transformation of the city. So that's
Yeah.
and if so, I think that this is the moment in time where we need to take these decisions, because if we don't say no now, well then maybe they're going to be a lot during the Olympic Games, and then
Olympic.
it will be more difficult to go backwards.
Exactly. And actually, now I'm glad you discussed the private e-scooters because I almost forgot to ask. If they ban the shared e-scooters, people who were using the shared e-scooters might just buy a private e-scooter, and then it's going to be harder to regulate, especially when it comes to the parking issues, the riding with one or two, and the accident will probably still happen, right? So what do you propose? Do you propose banning all e-scooters then, private and shared?
Yeah, what I propose is simple, and that's why I'm so sure about it. It's simply the Dutch model and the Dutch reasoning. That's and to really put all our efforts on a bicycle culture, so that we don't give our kids the idea that, well, you don't need a bicycle because you can just hop on a scooter and you don't need to move your body. You see, it's not good. It's good for children to learn how to ride a bicycle as they're 4 years old, as in the Netherlands. And I think that is what we need. We need an active lifestyle. I think this is really about much more than just a scooter. This is about, do we want an active city that's not about machines but about humans? I think that's what we want.
Moving
This is a
around.
city that is it's a city is not about speed. A city is about accessibility. So let's talk about
Exactly.
not making machines that get you from one place to another, but let's change the way we build our cities. Let's make the 15-minute city, you see, where we can walk and where a bicycle can actually do the job. We want a city that really turns around contact. You see, with contact, of course, on a bicycle you can make contact with other people, and also on a scooter, but it's less than when you're on the sidewalk. So I think
Exactly.
many discussions are gonna take place, also in terms of the helmet, for example. Should we wear the helmet? Should we put a license plate on it? Which is already the case in
Yeah.
Paris, right? Because Paris, they already did a lot. They made a lot of efforts already, because there are license plates on it. But
Exactly. I was going to ask. Yeah.
that's the Minister of Transportation, Clement Beaune. He wants a national charter for that, and that will be signed
Yeah.
by all operators. So we're just starting the big discussion. I thank you for being the early bird to really kick off that
Early
discussion
days.
with the podcasts like this.
And what about the mopeds? There's a lot of shared mopeds in Paris as well, who take up a lot of space when it comes to parking as well. I saw some pictures of e-scoots, mopeds, and so on. What is your opinion about that? Because it's also not an active travel mode like the bike. It's even farther removed from the bike when you look at the other effects that e-mopeds or just mopeds in general have. What is your opinion on that?
There again, I look at Dutch city. I think that um, it's much more dangerous, even than e-scooters. A moped is 40, and a motorbike is 40 times more dangerous than a car, for example. So it's not something to encourage. Actually, the city of Utrecht, which is really the cycling city of the Netherlands with Amsterdam, is they had allowed them, but they stopped it.
They had Felix and Go Sharing, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but they stopped it. They took them out because also because of these messy reasons, because there was a lot
Yeah,
of
they replaced with bike.
antisocial behavior with it, and I still think that is not the problem, but also because they felt that it's not part of the image that they have of a city, the peoplescape and the landscape, as they say, of the city. It's supposed to be active, and the human needs to be central. And I think that that's why we should not encourage it. But the Holy Trinity, which is walking first of all, and if you
Okay.
can't walk, well, then you take a bicycle, and if you can't take a bicycle, you take public transportation. And if you really need to go to a place and you need to transport your children, your mother-in-law, and your huge I don't know, a closet.
Cargo bike.
You just take a car. It's perfectly
Yeah,
legal,
yeah,
but it's all about what you said about the Dutch cities. They're so nice and calm. It's because they turned the car in just the least resort option, and it's not to punish anybody, but it's just to nudge people towards virtuous behavior that's good for the city and for themselves. And it takes quite some courage to do so. And I think that that we need to have this discussion, to have this one-on-one discussion on about these arguments.
yeah, exactly. But it's nice that you just mentioned the Netherlands. When other cities look at the Netherlands, they need to also understand that it did not happen overnight, right? When you look at the 70s in the Netherlands, it was also a car culture, I believe, or in the 60s. It's something that gradually happened over time through a lot of campaigns from the city, but also matching investments. So cities also needs to put investments and the road infrastructure. And over time, uh, the culture might shift to a more bike culture, right? It's not something that just happens in 2 or 3 years by allowing shared bikes in a city, right?
No,
That is not really
it,
realistic.
it, it is not. It is not. People say sometimes, "Yeah, but Stein, you're from the Netherlands. It's in their culture for ages." Not at all. In the 70s, it was created by man. It's the opposite. It's thanks to infrastructure that a culture can emerge, that a bicycle culture or a scooter culture, whatever, can emerge. That's why I say this need we create it. It's first we
Exactly.
create our roads, and then our roads they create us. They shape us. If you shape roads that give a lot of space to active mobility, then people they will start walking. It's just because
Yeah,
they're not stupid. They want to do what's most easy for them. And in French cities
exactly.
nowadays, the most easy and quick way to go through it is in a car. So that's why people have done that for so long. But now the car has been democratized, and so there are too many of them, which punishes everybody. And that's why we're in this search for new mobilities, and the scooter is one of them. But in the Netherlands, indeed, what changed is simply accidents, heavy accidents. There were children were involved in accidents, and one child who was 6 years old was killed. Simone was her name, and the papa of that little girl happened to be a journalist, and he said, "I want to change this. I don't want to cry and go on with our lives as before. I want to change this." So he published an article that was entitled "Stop the Child Murder." And because he wanted bicycle lanes, he wanted places where children can play in the road on the roads without being in danger, as was the case before. I was born in the 70s, and I used to play on the roads, with my little, how do you call it, the
Yeah,
knickers. I don't know what the word is, the bie. And
yeah,
that's no longer the case, because everything has become, it's been taken by the car. And that was one thing. And the other thing is the oil crisis. The oil suddenly became so expensive that the government had to do something. And now, today, you see these two elements arising, because we have an energy problem that is going to become huge, with the crisis in Ukraine. And people are also becoming more aware of their need to have a pleasant environment. And I think that the COVID crisis has really shaken us. It has shown us that we're vulnerable people, that we need nature, that we need a pleasant and quiet and non-dangerous and non-polluted environment. And I think that's the good side of it. And now we're building it, and we're trying out the scooter, and we're having this conversation to find out if it's the best way. And I think that's extremely
yeah.
positive.
Exactly, exactly. And yeah, it's funny that you mentioned the energy crisis, which is still an actual discussion, right? I know with my own bike share, a few months ago when there was a huge increase in the energy prices, we used to advertise or shared bikes at tank stations. So, so when people were tanking, their car, they should see they would see like a promotion to get a long-term bike renting, which was always cheaper than a full tank. So we saw some increase there.
Beautiful.
And it also shows the mindset where the people are in, right? They are looking for alternatives. They start to think about living a healthier life, and getting cargo bikes as well, which is also coming up even with younger families. So that's a nice development. But to sorry to kind of like round up this nice discussion, I wanted to bring it back to France. You mentioned that France is not a bike culture yet. However, when I look at the different cities in France, like Lyon, Marseille, Paris, even in Lille, there is a good infrastructure when it comes to city bike share. Like you have the Velo and
Mm-mm.
Paris, who are really part of the city, who have been part of the city for so long, for many decades already, or even 10 years, I think, in Paris, and who have a lot of usage. So in Paris, it's 44 million this year. Does the fact that the privately owned bike or e-bike is still not that popular or not that used yet, does that say something about the people who use the bikes in France? Is it, for example, maybe students or tourists, or what do you
Well,
think?
first of all, I just put the barrier very high. You see, because I'm actually being stupid because I'm making the
Comparing
wrong
with,
comparison.
with
Because you should never make a comparison between France and the Netherlands, because that's too far. There's too much testing in between. But the advantage is that
different culture.
the France doesn't need to wait 40 years because the recipe is there. It's been tested. They can just copy them, and I can, if you apply the three principles of separating bicycles from cars, of reducing speed and car volumes, and you create a bicycle network. If you apply these three things, you'll get a bicycle city immediately in a very few months, actually. And that is what happens here. Is in when first of all, in 2007, the former mayor Bertrand Delanoë, he set up the bicycle share system that's called Vélib, and it was a big success, and it still is. Why? Because it enabled people to try a good quality bike for very cheap. So that's one thing. But it's not that created the bicycle. It just anticipated the bicycle culture a little bit. And what really sparked it is in 2015 when Anne Hidalgo, the current mayor of Paris, she started what we call the REV, the Réseau Express Vélo. It's the bicycle highway
Okay.
network. And it was built, and now it's completed, kind of. And immediately when it was put in place, and it's only 43 kilometers with 4 bicycle lanes, that's it, from north to south, east to west, and two along the River Seine, the bicycle use exploded. Why? Because for the first time in the history of, now, not France, but because in Grenoble and Strasbourg you already have it. But
Indeed.
of Paris, you had a bicycle network, and that is what had not been understood so far. The bicycle had been seen as the trip you make on a Sunday afternoon with your children, or what the man does on a sports bicycle. No, there for the first
Yep.
time it was presented as a real um, mobility solution to go from A to B from wherever you are, and that it's like almost like drilling oil. You drill, and then suddenly the oil comes out. But in this case, it's not
Yeah.
oil; it is cyclist, because it's like because you created the need actually with this bicycle network, and now we're in the incredible situation where these bicycle lanes that are bidirectional. You have two directions in one bicycle lane. They're too small because there are too many people. Why? Because Paris is the most
Clearly.
densely populated area in Europe. So we're in a situation like, wow, we discovered that we actually had a need for bicycle, but it was hidden all this time. Now it's coming out, and so urgently we need to double the bicycle lanes, and
Exactly.
that's what happened. And now I think that we're heading towards. Then we had the COVID revolution, which because that actually
There was a spike.
extended that spiked it, and that extended the network also beyond Paris, because that's also important to note. People always think of Paris, but Paris is actually a very small part of the Paris region. Paris is 2 million inhabitants, 2.2 million, and the Paris region, it's 12 million inhabitants. So that means that around
Okay.
Paris, people also started bicycling. Why? Because suddenly the provinces, let's say around Paris, they call them départements. They created
Yep.
also a bicycle network of temporary bicycle lanes, and people are not crazy if they can choose between a traffic jam and a whole new free network that's good for your health, where you can travel more quickly, easily, and nicely. Well, they will use it, and that's what they did. They heavily invested in electric bikes, and now they're all over the place. And I think that the third revolution that is upcoming now, it is the Olympic Games that will happen, because it's going to create such a mobility challenge with climate change that is all over the screens right now, that they know that they have to do something. And that's why the mayor of Paris launched that situation, and that will be the first time in history that that we will use the bicycle not only as a transportation mode, but also as a solution for mega sports events or for mega events that we will organize. And that's going to be new. And of
Yeah.
course, it happened already, in Zandvoort in the Netherlands, where they organized the Formula One races, where 1 out of 3
True.
visitors actually
True.
came on a
Saw it.
bicycle. But when Paris does it, it's like the whole world knows it. And you'll see that next year. I can promise you, it's going to give beautiful images of people that will never forget that the games in Paris in 2024, those were the games where people came to go on a bicycle. I think they're going to come not only for the games, but also to enjoy Paris on a bicycle,
Yeah.
straight, from the
Yeah.
bicycle, and they're gonna enjoy Paris much more than hidden in a big bus. you'll,
Yeah,
you'll see.
exactly. I mean, Paris is a beautiful city that you need to enjoy from outside. So walking, um, cycling, maybe scootering. Who knows?
it's
That will depend on Sunday, right?
Sunday is
So
going to be it's going to be D-Day. Yeah, it's
yeah,
yeah. Let's yeah. I think I'm going to be there to really see what's going to happen. We're going to know it on the day itself. Who's going to vote? We don't know. The really people want to go vote, because there's a lot of abstention even in political votes. So, but I think it's important. It's not okay. It's not the most priority question, but it will open a lot of new discussions that we need to have to
debate and
evolve,
discussion.
because it's, of course, mobility is about the hardware in the city, but the hidden part, it's what happens between our ears. I always say that the most important infrastructure to make your city cyclable, it's 20 centimeters. It's from your left ear to your right ear. That's if you build the idea that your city should be cyclable there, well, all the rest is just details.
Exactly. That's a beautiful way to end this discussion and debate that we had. Stein, thank you very much for coming on the podcast. It was a nice discussion. I enjoyed your arguments and also your passion for bike shares. So thank you very much for joining
Thank
us.
you.